My childhood town of Rameshwaram is a small island. Its highest spot is atop of a hill called Gandhamadhan Parvatam. Standing there, you could see the whole of Rameshwaram stretched out around you. Lush green coconut palms swaying everywhere, the sea in the distance and the looming Gopuram of Ramaswamy temple presiding over the skyline. It was a quiet town then. The people made their living from either fishing or coconut farming and from the tourism that occurred due to the presence of the temple. Rameshwaram is one of the holiest pilgrimage spots for many Indians, and the town was almost always full of pilgrims and tourists. The small local population consisted of mostly Hindu households with a sprinkling of Muslims like us and Christians too. Each community lived in a healthy contentment next to the other. The divisions and vicissitudes of outside world rarely made their way here. The daily papers brought news of upheavals and the communal fault lines being drawn elsewhere, but here life continued at its age-old, leisurely pace. This quiet harmony had been in place for generations. My father loved to tell us the story of our great-great-grandfather who once saved the idol of Ramanaswamy temple. The story went that on a certain festival day, the Vigraha or idol would be taken out of the sanctum sanctorum and carried in a procession around the temple precincts. The temple had a number of tanks dotting it, and the idol was taken around the periphery of these tanks too. During one such procession, in a sequence of events no one remembers clearly anymore, the Vigraha fell into the tank. What a calamity that was! People stood rooted in horror, imagining the wrath of gods falling upon them very soon. One person, however, did not lose his presence of mind, my great-great-grandfather. He leapt into the tank and retrieved the idol in no time. The gratitude of the priest and other temple officials was overwhelming. Yes, he was a Muslim, and yes, caste and religious purists would be horrified at the more sacred element of the temple being handled by someone not authorized to do so. But none of these feelings were articulated. Instead, my great-great-grandfather was treated like a hero. The temple also made a proclamation that from now on, at the festival, the temple would give Mudal Muradai to him. This was a rare honor for anyone, let alone for someone from a different religion. It meant that on each such festival day, the temple would first honor or give Muradai to my great-great-grandfather. This tradition went on for years and years, and the Muradai would be given to my father too. The sense of harmony continued into later years. Like I have mentioned in another chapter, my father had a ferry business in which pilgrims were taken to Dhanishkodi. Our ferry service was used by the temple too. My father was the Imam of the Rameshwaram Mosque. He was a deeply devout man with complete and utter faith in Quran. He inculcated all the habits of a good Muslim in his children and indeed in his entire family. For the people of the town, he was a philosopher and guide, someone they could turn into with their problems, whether spiritual or otherwise. One of his closest friends was a priest of the Ramaswamy temple, Pakshi Lakshman Shastri. Shastrigal was not only the priest, but also a very learned man, well versed in Vedic knowledge. I still remember his visage perfectly. He was always dressed in the traditional attire of a temple priest, in his dhoti and angavastram. On his head, he sported the mandatory tuft of the Brahmins, the kudumu. He was one of the kindest, most gentle men I knew. There was a third person who was an important in the spiritual life of our little community, and that was Father Bodal, the priest of the lone church in the town. He was as involved in the welfare of the church-goers of Rameshwaram as my father and Shastrigal, and as concerned about the need for harmony and peace in the Rameshwaram. The memory of these three learned men is still etched in my mind. I can see them. One in his turban and Imam's cloak, another in his dhoti, and the third in his kashor. They met every Friday evening at around 4:30 and discussed matters of religion and the happenings of the town. Sometimes people came to visit them at that time with specific issues to be resolved, or the three men kept each other appraised of anything that could potentially threaten the peace among the people and together. They tried to work out ways of clearing miscommunication or squashing rumors before they assumed dangerous proportions. The fundamental requirement for peace, effective communication among sections of the people, was always kept alive by these three patriarchs. Their discussions ranged over a number of topics. The freedom movement that was taking the country in an entirely new direction, the attitude of the British government to the cause of the nationalists, and how all this affected us concerned them deeply. They quietly soothed the society around them, making it a harmonious whole where everyone could have an opportunity to speak freely to them. One incident from my childhood brought this reality close to my life. I was then about 8 years old and studying in 3rd standard. My best friends were Ramanand Shastri, Arvindam and Shiva. All of them were Brahmins, and Ramanand in fact was Pakshi Lakshman Shastri's son. We led the useful life of schoolboys, spending most of the day together in the classroom and outside. Like all good friends, our day was incomplete if at any time one of us was absent and we could not share with each other the minute details of all that is important for boys of that age. In the classroom, we sat near one another and Ramanandan and I shared the same bench. Before I proceed with the main story, I would like to sketch a portrait of my school which holds such beautiful memories of days of innocence and mischief and learning for me. It was called the Rameshwaram Panchayat Primary School and I attended it from 1936 to 1944. It was situated near the seashore and was not the most sturdy building certainly. Parts of it were built with bricks but the roof was thatched. But it was the only school in Rameshwaram in those days and all the children of the town studied there. We were 400 boys and girls in total. Yes, the school had an unimpressive building and scanty amenities, but it was an interesting place nonetheless. The teachers, particularly those who taught history, geography and science, were loved by the students. Why? Because they loved teaching and ensured that each one of us excelled in our studies. To give equal attention to the 55 children in each class could not have been an easy task. They did not want us to only earn good marks in our exams, they also wanted us to develop a love for the subjects they taught us. We saw the light of purity shining in our teachers. Even if one student was absent for a day, they would go to the parents and inquire about the child's welfare and the reason for his not coming to school. If one of us got high marks, the teacher would be the first person to go to our homes and share the information with our parents. My school was a happy place. All of us who started our schooling there completed our studies till the 8th standard. I don't remember even a single person dropping out. These days, when I visit schools, both big and small, all across the country, I tell them that true quality does not come from a great building or great facilities or great advertisements. It happens when education is imparted with love by great teachers. To return to my story, schools of that time, particularly small ones like mine, did not have uniforms. We were free to wear any traditional items required by our religion. My friend Ramanathan sported a tuft or kudumi like his father. I went to school wearing my little woven skull cap like all Muslim boys of the town. Not once had any of us either noticed or remarked upon this. When we were in the third standard, there was a great excitement in our lives. We had a new teacher at school. In a small self-contained community, this was a matter of much excitement and discussion. We students were eager with anticipation to know what our new teacher would be like. Would he be strict or lenient, quick-tempered or patient? We could not wait for him to start teaching us, and the first day he came to the classroom, all our eagerness spilled forth. The teacher was also a Hindu, a Brahmin. As soon as he entered the classroom, he cast a quick appraising eye over all of us, perhaps taking in the diverse attire of his bunch of boys. Today, I think he must have missed noticing the bright eyes and eager smiles of all the children. Strangely, those are the first things that strike me when confronted by a room full of children. But our new teacher was quick to get down to business. He walked to the front of the class, and the first people his eyes settled on were Ramanand and I. We were the star pupils, always eager to learn and participate, and sat right in front. His eyes lingered on my cap and on Ramanand's tuft. A look of annoyance, even disbelief, washed over his face. Without giving any reason, he demanded to know my name. When I told him, I was peremptorily told to gather my things and move to the back row, for reasons only known to him. I felt sad, even humiliated. I wondered why this had happened. Ramanathan was in tears. I still recall his large eyes awash with tears as I picked up my books and moved away from him. But neither of us was ready to let this go unreported. That very day, I told my father about it, and Ramanathan also told his father. The man was shocked and dismayed. This went against everything they had worked for. A teacher who was supposed to be imparting knowledge and opening up our minds was instead doing just the opposite. We had rarely seen these two mild-mannered gentlemen so agitated. They immediately spoke to one another and confirmed the details of the incident. The next Friday, when dusk was falling, they met as usual. Father Bodil was present too. The teacher had been summoned and presented himself. In the gathering darkness, a day turned into night. My father and Shastrikal told him in no uncertain terms that the scourge of religious divisions which was disturbing India's fabric in other parts of the country would not be allowed to grow here. They would not allow children to be segregated. They would certainly not tolerate anyone who made religion a divisive factor instead of being inclusive, and they would never let this infect the minds of youngest members of the society. All of this was conveyed to our teacher with dignity and courtesy. Would he want to see himself as a man of knowledge to whom the future of the country could be entrusted? He was asked. Our teacher stood silent, thinking. Then finally he spoke. Yes, he acknowledged he had tried to separate the two boys. And no, he had not bothered to think through the consequences of his actions when he did so. This was the way he had seen society being structured around him always, and he was just blindly following the rules. No one had ever taught him otherwise or made him see the futility of such divisions. He promised to rectify the wrong he had done the very next day, and he did do so. This was how I had a first-hand experience of the way the three religious elders settled the matter firmly and openly. They made the problem go away without letting it grow and faster. The essence of good management in any situation, I later learned. It was also the first glimmer of a thought that he has shaped me since, that it must always be our inner convictions and strength of beliefs that dictate our actions. External forces, temptations, and counsels will always be dined into us, but those among us who can stand up to what we innately believe to be good and right will finally be at peace with ourselves. Our country needs citizens who trust their individuality, who cannot be manipulated by people with unscrupulous agendas. As far as the fact of my religion is concerned, from Rameshwaram, I followed my destiny that took me into the world of science and technology. I was always a believer in science, but the spiritual atmosphere of my youth has stayed with me. I well understand different points of view, particularly about God. I have read and assimilated the knowledge contained in different religious texts, from the Quran to the Gita to the Holy Bible. Together they have made me a product of this unique land of ours, a sanctuary creation of the best of our diverse traditions. And if ever I am asked what it is like to be a Muslim in this country, I can point to the people I grew up with. My father, Shastrigal, and Father Bodhar. Indeed, many others like them whom I met later, who have upheld the religious and moral standards of our nation. In their own ways, they have contributed to make ours a country we can justly proclaim to be a multi-religious, multi-ethnic nation, where there is space for each of us to breathe. Yes, we have deep problems and fissures being created daily. But if the generations to come remember the stories of people like my great-great-grandfather and the Imam and priest of the Rameshwaram of long ago, I am sure we will continue to survive and thrive as a secular democracy forever.